we started yesterday talking about DeSean Jackson, not Steven Jackson, DeSean Jackson, and his comments on Instagram, and what it was a bad look for him. Right? I think the only thing that could be worse, potentially be worse is not, well, I guess he could double down on it. But the only thing that could be worse is what has happened since for Steven Jackson. Steven Jackson doubled down on his comments yesterday, saying that DeSean Jackson was teaching, was just educating people. Then today he went on Instagram Live and said, in other words, you're upset at me, because he didn't apologize, because of what I didn't say what you wanted me to say. You know who the Rothschilds are. They own all the banks, Jackson then said. I haven't said one untrue thing yet. In other words, Steven Jackson, and now remember, Steven Jackson was George Floyd's friend. He was what we wished Colin Kaepernick on many levels could be. We thought maybe that Steven Jackson could be a leader as a professional athlete of the Black Lives Matter movement. A guy who could actually give us some real world experience with police brutality, racism, tell us who George Floyd was, have him explain to us exactly what it feels like to be a black star athlete and, by his estimation, be treated unfairly by the police. But the reaction we heard from the entire NFL, which was one of being alarmed, offended. Heck, we even had a player who plays with Drew Brees tell him basically to F off. On social media, it will live forever. Yet to this point, we have heard not one person who plays currently in the NFL, not one NBA player or former NBA player like Steven Jackson, who called for justice and freedom and equal rights for all, stand up and say, hey, DeSean Jackson was wrong, and we're hypocritical if we don't point out that we're all in this together. Our Jewish brothers and sisters should feel safe and should feel welcome in this country that's trying to go through a process of growth. He didn't say that. And so the hypocrisy of the Black Lives Matter movement has come full circle, has become front and center. That's right. We're calling you on your hypocrisy. And look, if you want to say, well, that's not fair, why? I'm not disputing that the right-wing conservatives have been hypocrites for years. I'm not disputing that. Okay? The two arguments that are made by the left, sports, non-sports, liberals, progressives, whatever, and they're good arguments, are one, you're excluding people. Okay? By not providing, by not granting the same rights to lesbians, gays, transsexuals, by their estimation, people of color, based upon some of the things that the right believes in. I mean, the easiest one is abortion, right? And the same, a true conservative believes in less government. Well, how do you believe in less government if the government is going to rule what a woman does to her own body? That's hypocrisy, is it not? So you have exclusivity and hypocrisy. That's the narrative that the left wants to tell you about the right. Well, guess what we have here? Yesterday, I shared with you a story of a senator in the state of Georgia who's a part owner of the Atlanta Dream. And in the same statement where the WNBA promotes the equal rights to all, they then call out the part owner because she doesn't completely agree with the Black Lives Matter movement and doesn't believe it should be promoted because it becomes divisive. Then we have Steven Jackson, who I would even tell you, did a marvelous job of being a leader and an out front spokesperson for not just who George Floyd was, but what his death represents. And while no one was killed, no one was harmed, it's one thing to not understand the comments that DeSean Jackson posted in a fake Hitler quote. It's a whole other thing to double and triple down when you have a chance to understand everything, take a breath, read up, and then go on your own Instagram Live. And oh yeah, by the way, he has a successful podcast. He appears on Fox Sports. He appears on ESPN. He's a former NBA champion. We call it him, and I've had only good interactions with Steven Jackson, but dude, this is bullcrap. I'm not even mad. I'm embarrassed for you. You should be embarrassed for yourself because this is the problem. This is what people are talking about. No one I know doesn't actually believe that black lives don't matter. Of course they do. Black lives matter. That is a great statement. They do. But there hasn't been any marches or protests or leadership when 6 little kids were killed this weekend. Innocent children, just standers by, one's in a car outside the Wendy's where there's been demonstrations. There's no protest to demonstrate that. You said Black Lives Matter. We agree Black Lives Matter. No one disputes that. Got to do a better job of taking care of our black brothers and sisters. There is no disputing that. But you're a hypocrite. You're an absolute hypocrite if you then double down on the statements made by DeSean Jackson. Calling out Jews is trying to run the world, echoing statements of World War II Germany. What are you doing? Now all of a sudden we start to go, let me look further into your friendship and the statements you made about George Floyd. No matter how much you champion him, now I start to question, hold on a second. Wait. All right? I saw the video. I was alarmed. I was embarrassed. Not because Derek Chauvin's white, just because he's a human being doing that to another human being. We've lost the ability to be reasonable. And the same people that have rightly called out the other side as being hypocrites and being exclusive are doing the exact same thing. And you're ruining your argument. You're ruining your movement. Any sort of progress that's made now, you just sit there and go like, what was the statement made? And it's an echoing of a statement from the 1960s. Basically, silence is deafening, right? That silence is compliance. That if you don't speak out against police brutality, then you are complicit in the crimes. That's what we've been told for the last 2 months. And when I say we, I mean all of America, regardless of skin color. Well, there hasn't been an NFL player or an NBA player who has taken to social media or regular media and said, this is wrong. Now, maybe it screams at our lack of knowledge for history and how embarrassing our school systems are. If you want to tell me the fact that most of America didn't know what Juneteenth was until Juneteenth came and then went, and it should be taught in the history books, as should the Tulsa race riots, that's fine. What's more embarrassing is the Holocaust is taught in history books. The logic, but what happened for World War I and World War II is taught. And look, I'm going to sit here and tell you, like, I consider Steven Jackson to be a friend. I've never had a bad interaction with him. I've disagreed with him. Never had a bad interaction with him. But you sound like at least a moron, likely a hypocrite, and maybe something far worse if you really dig deep into what he's actually saying. Just open a history book and say, hey, how did Hitler come to power in World War II? Oh, yeah. See, they were paying reparations for World War I. Most of the country was in bad shape. the Jewish community had leadership and was doing quite well financially in comparison. And so Hitler blamed the Jews, which allowed him to round them up and put them into ghettos and execute 6 million of them. But you use some conspiracy theory from the internet to validate what DeSean Jackson said, and then there hasn't been a single professional sports athlete to come out and say, hey, this is wrong? Your silence is deafening. I'm not mad. I'm just embarrassed for you. I'm just embarrassed. And it is, in fact, the same thing as we've talked about with the NBA. I'm not a Donald Trump supporter, but I do realize that by putting things on the back of a jersey, none of which can say Trump 2020, you're doing the opposite of what you say. You're not allowing for free speech and for free thought. That's not progress. That's regression. What are we doing? You're repeating the exact same mistakes of every previous regime, or the exact people that you believe are inhumane. It bothers me so that it's one thing for our country to be divided, which hasn't been helped by a president which has continued to divide us. It's a whole other thing for a movement that's supposed to be inclusive and progressive and helping everybody learn, to going back to rhetoric of the 1930s and echoing conspiracy theories from the internet about people who, like black people, have been enslaved, have derogatory comments made about them, have had all of their lively belongings stripped of them. I mean, I laugh because it's so uncomfortable to point out to people that you like, dude, you sound like an idiot. And oh yeah, by the way, not only are you likely to cost yourself any sort of job, you're causing an entire movement to be seen as a fraud, which it actually, most of it is based upon good. That's the thing. It's actually based upon a good idea of respecting human life, of seeing black people in a different lens than some had seen black people in that lens for a long time. That's what you're screaming out for. Hey, don't racially profile us. Got it. You know what you might want to do? Not racially profile Jewish people as being greedy and running all the banks in America, many of which are actually publicly owned. I'm embarrassed for our lack of understanding as human beings. I'm embarrassed for professional athletes, especially in the NFL. When one of their own says something stupid, you don't even have to crush him if you don't want to. You don't have to go Malcolm Jenkins on Drew Brees. You simply could have said, DeSean Jackson said something stupid. We've all had a stupid tweet. It was bad. Let's move on. Let's move forward. Let's learn more. No, it hasn't happened. And allows me to call you a hypocrite. And me to tell you that your argument for your movement, based upon good, based upon an idea that I believe in, Black Lives Matter, to mean something else, to be seen as a fraud, to be seen as just as exclusive and just as hypocritical as any argument the other side has made.